Dear friends, you remember in Four Little Angels that Sir Handel Brown, the owner, sent Skarloey away to be mended. These stories tell you what happened when the little old engine came home. Skarloey is not real. You can only see him in these books. But there is a real engine just like Skarloey. He is very, very old and has been mended. His name is Tally Lynn, and he lives at Tallinn in Wales. You would all enjoy going to see him at work. The author.
Every day where the little engines work, the crisp air is suddenly filled with a familiar noise. The lakes and mountains have many visitors, and Harold the helicopter flies the sky, making sure that no one is in trouble. All present and correct. Time to return to base. Then Harold noticed something. A sturdy diesel was coming round the mountain. Harold flew lower for a closer inspection. I'm Harold. Who are you? I'm Rusty, replied the diesel. Don't recall seeing you before. What brings you this way? Sir Topham Hatt sent me to help the other engines, huffed Rusty. This was no time for a chat with a helicopter. Well done. Cheers, and keep up the good work. Cheeky chopper, muttered Rusty. Not long now, encouraged the driver. We'll soon be at the top station. Peter, Sam, and Sir Handel were glad to see Rusty. Even so, Sir Handel wouldn't stop grumbling. The cars didn't like Sir Handel and wanted to play tricks on him. No one understands our feelings, sympathized Gordon. Now, if you were ill, you couldn't shunt cars, could you? Good idea, replied Sir Handel. I'll try it. He did so next morning. I don't feel well, he groaned. There wasn't time to examine him, so some of his cars were coupled behind Peter Sam's coaches. Rusty promised to follow with the rest. Peter Sam didn't mind the extra work. He left his coaches at the station and trundled cheerfully on. Soon they reached the quarry where the cars were needed. Empty cars at the bottom of the slope are hitched to a cable. Loaded ones at the top are hitched to another. By their weight, loaded cars run down the steep slope, pulling the empty ones up. Peter Sam duly waited at the bottom of the slope for the loaded cars. He never bumped cars unless they misbehaved. But the loaded cars couldn't see him properly. They thought he was Sir Handel. Their chance for trickery had come. Faster! Faster! They yelled. No, no, wailed the empty cars. It's Peter Sam! But it was no use. Hurrah! Hurrah! Roared the cars. Peter Sam shut his eyes. Beep! Beep! Wailed Peter Sam. Rusty was working nearby and came to help clear up the mess. Bust my buffers, exclaimed Rusty. Never mind, Peter Sam. We'll get you out. Peter Sam felt battered. His funnel was cracked and his boiler dented. Thank you, Rusty, he sighed and limped slowly home. I'm sorry about your accident, said Sir Handel. I always stand well back. Cars don't like me. Why didn't you warn me? I didn't think. You never do. You can start thinking now while you're doing Peter Sam's work as well as your own. That'll teach you to pretend you're ill. Sir Handel did start thinking about Gordon. When the wreckage was cleared away, Rusty set off along the line. Splendid to see you again, whizzed Harold. I'm completing my evening's lookabout. Well done. Cheers, and keep up the good work. And the little diesel purred back home. Skarloey had been to the works to be mended. He felt much better. Rusty the Diesel was helping him off his rail car. Skarloey hadn't met the little diesel before. Rusty seems a kindly sort of engine, he thought to himself. I help to mend the line and do odd jobs, explained Rusty. I hear everyone is looking forward to seeing you again. Come on. Peter Sam was feeling depressed. He was still getting over his accident, but he wanted to start work again. Sir Topham Hatt wouldn't let him. Another day's rest will do you good, he said. Besides, I've got a surprise for you. For me, sir? How nice, sir. What is it, sir? Wait and see. The surprise was Skarloey. Oh, said Peter Sam, I'm glad you've come home. They lit Skarloey's fire and he sizzled happily. I feel all excited, he said, just like a young engine. Now tell me all the news. I see you've met Rusty, said Peter Sam. Yes, I like that diesel. So do I, replied Peter Sam. It's a pity Duncan doesn't. Who is Duncan? He came as a spare engine after my accident, replied Peter Sam. Is he useful? He keeps busy, and I'm sure he means well, but he's bouncy and rude. He sings and sways and swivels around. His drivers call it rock and roll. I understand, said Skarloey gravely. His driver interrupted. Duncan has done it again. He's stuck in a tunnel. Come on, old boy, we'll have to get him out. Skarloey was pleased. He wanted to run, looked forward to meeting Duncan. They found the caboose and some workmen and hurried up the line. How nice and smooth the rails are, thought Skarloey. They've mended all the old bumps. The little diesel has helped to do that. What a difference Rusty's made to the line. Quite soon they found Duncan. He was stuck at the far end of the tunnel, and he was very cross. I'm a plain, blunt engine. I speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes. This railway is no good at all. Don't be silly, snapped his driver. This tunnel is quite big enough for engines who don't rock and roll. It took a long time to clear away the rocks and set Duncan free again. At last, Skarloey was able to push Duncan and his coaches safely through. The caboose was left on the siding, and the workmen stayed to make sure everything was safe. Duncan grumbled all the way home, but Skarloey paid no attention. Later, Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to Duncan. Listen to me. There is nothing wrong with that tunnel. You stuck in it because you tried to do rock and roll. Tunnels are not dance floors, and you are not a pop star. Then Sir Topham Hatt gave his full attention to Duncan's funnel. If it happens again, he ended ominously, I shall find ways to cut you down to size. In other words, your career is on the line. Need I say more? Duncan thought Sir Topham Hatt had said quite enough, and he remained completely silent and still for at least a whole evening. Skarloey, the little engine, loves all the sights and sounds along his line and knows them very well. One morning, soon after he returned from being mended, he was enjoying his journey more than ever before. Along the way, he met Rusty. You know, he said, if I couldn't see these familiar faces and places, I'd think I was on a different railway. You've done wonders with these rails. Rusty laughed. I'm glad you're pleased. Manager said, let's mend the track so well that he won't know where he is. And we did. And you didn't, if you take my meaning. Skarloey liked this hard-working diesel. There's still one bad bit, warned Rusty, just before the first station. An engine might come off there, particularly Duncan. He will rock and roll along the line. Look at him right now. I hope he doesn't hurt his passengers. What's that about me? I'm a plain engine, and I believe in plain speaking. Speak up. Rusty warned Duncan about the bad bit of rail. Huh. I know my way about. I don't need smelly diesels to tell me what to do. Rusty felt hurt. Duncan banged about the yard. Then he clattered crossly to the station. James was already there, waiting for him. You're late, he snapped. I know, said Duncan. It's that smelly diesel's fault. Rusty tries to teach me how to stay on the rails and then goes off leaving me to find my own coaches. You poor engine, sympathized James. I know all about diesels. One crept into our yard and ordered us about. I soon sent him packing. Duncan was filled with admiration. He didn't know that James was boastful, sometimes didn't tell the truth. Send Rusty packing! Send Rusty packing! Snorted Duncan. He climbed the hill furiously. Well done, boy, encouraged his driver. Keep it up. Soon they were near the first station. Duncan was pleased. Nothing's happened. Nothing's happened, silly old diesel. Clever me. And he rocked and rolled along the line. Steady, boy, checked his driver. But it was too late. Sleepers and ballast, I'm off. And he was. I warned him, said Rusty. But all he did was call me names. The little diesel refused to move. I'm ashamed of you, Rusty, said Skarloey. Think of the passengers. What are they going to do? Oh, I'd forgotten them. Yes, of course. We must help the passengers. And Rusty roared into life. Duncan stood sad and solitary. He couldn't rock and roll now. Oh dear, he thought. Everyone will know how silly I am. The passengers had to get out and help too. They weren't very pleased about that, but worked as hard as they could. They carefully levered Duncan back onto the line. After that, Duncan was extra careful all day. At last, evening came. Rusty, he whispered, thank you for helping. I'm sorry I was rude to you. That's all right, Duncan. I wish all diesels were like you. Let's be friends. Suits me, replied Rusty. We'll mend that bad bit of rail first thing tomorrow.
One day, the Fan Controller brought some people to see the railway. He showed them everything. They travelled in the trains and looked at the stations and bridges and coaches. Yes, they would say thoughtfully, we'll take this, or no, we won't take that. They made notes in their books. Peter Sam whispered to Sir Handel.
Men came and did that on our old line.
And then,
Said Sir Handel.
soon afterwards, it was
sold.
Finished Peter Sam mournfully. Peter Sam didn't sing anymore. He wanted to cry. The other engines were sad too. What's the matter with you all? His driver asked him one day. You look like dying ducks.
We don't want to be sold,
Said Peter Sam miserably. Sold? The driver was surprised her. Who to?
to those people who came and talked about taking things.
You silly little engine, laughed his driver. They're not going to buy us. They're going to take our pictures on television. And he tried to explain what that meant.
Not going to be sold, not going to be sold.
Sang Peter Sam. He could hardly wait to tell the others. He told them about the television as well. They were pleased and excited too. All except Sir Handel.
I don't hold with it.
He grumbled.
Vulgar, I call it. Fancy traipsing about, making an exhibition of yourselves. I won't do it. I tell the Fat Controller, come here. I'll tell him something.
Skarloey said nothing. He just grinned at Peter Sam. But next day, when the Fat Controller did come to explain about the television, Sir Handel kept strangely quiet. No, said the Fat Controller at last. I want everyone to take part.
I don't feel well,
Quivered Sir Handel. You poor engine, said the Fat Controller gravely. You can stay in the shed. Sir Handel smiled proudly. Your driver and fireman shall take you to pieces. That will make a very interesting picture. Sir Handel's feelings were beyond words. That's that, said the Fat Controller. Now, Skarloey, will you take the coaches? Yes, please, sir. I was hoping you would let me. Duncan shall have a goods train, while Rusty, with the workmen, can show us how we mend the line.
Please, sir, what about me, sir?
Asked Peter Sam anxiously. The Fat Controller smiled. You, Peter Sam, shall pull the special television train.
Oh, sir,
Bubbled Peter Sam in ecstasy. The television men built towers for cameras beside the line. They put cameras on the trucks and filled the van with wires and instruments. Another truck was coupled behind, carrying aerials and generators. Everyone practiced hard until they knew just what they had to do. At last the time came and the announcer gave the signal.
We're on the air, we're on the air.
Puffed Peter Sam, and he rolled the heavy train to the shops. Where Sir Handel was being mended. Sir Handel did not enjoy their visit.
We're on the air, we're on the air.
Chanted Peter Sam. He trundled over the bridge near the middle station.
Peep, peep,
He whistled to Duncan.
we're coming.
The announcer talked to Duncan, and then they puffed over the second bridge to the siding, where Rusty and the men were waiting to explain about their work. Peter Sam whistled Rusty Toot in reply, and they clattered along. Plummeted over the viaduct near the waterfall, and rolled at last into the top station. That controller climbed down. We have arranged for television to let everyone see our little old engine. We are proud of him, 95 years old and good as new. There's nothing like him anywhere. 3 cheers for Skarloey! Peep, 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 whistled Peter Sam, and everyone joined in. Skarloey smiled. I'm very glad to be home again. Thank you, sir, and all for your nice surprise. Now I'll surprise you. Listen, when I was mended in England, I found my twin. The Fat Controller was startled. Is there really another engine? Yes, sir, chuckled Skarloey. There is. Another engine came to be mended too, called Tally Lynn. When the workmen saw us together, they laughed and called us their little old twins. Tally Lynn told me about his railway. It is a lovely one at Tallinn in Wales. Well, sir, they mended us both and sent us home. But I often think of Tally Lynn. He's 95 years old too, just like me. Please go to see him, all of you, and wish him dry rails and good runnings from Skarloey, his little old twin.
Once I was 7 years old, my mama told me, go make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old. It was a big, big world, but we thought we were bigger, pushing each other to